Well, today we have author Amy Lynn Green. Amy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for doing this interview.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. So, amongst all of you authors, it's a dream come true. So, yeah.
Well, we think that about each other too. So,
yes. And so now, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm new to the writing world, unlike some of the authors that you've talked to today, and my first novel, Things We Didn't Say, came out last November, and then my second one is coming out this September, called The Lines Between Us, both of them historical fiction set during World War II. I have a background in publishing, actually, and so that's how I came into the writing world and just really enjoy writing historical stories.
Nice. So what about World War II? Why'd you choose that?
Yeah, I enjoy reading in World War II, for one thing, but I've noticed that a lot of the books that I've read, especially in Christian fiction or fiction that have strong faith themes, tend to be set overseas, which is great. There was a lot of great drama going on during World War II, but I haven't read as much set on the U.S. home front. And so that's where both of my two books have been set, and then the one I'm working on now, my third book, is also U.S. home front story. And I love exploring times where there's lots of tension, and you don't get more tension than World War II. The first book deals with prisoners of war who are at a camp in Minnesota, and the conflict between the people of the town and the prisoners in the camp, the conflict between the Japanese translators who are nearby and the Japanese Americans who are not being treated as American citizens, and how they are willing to sacrifice for their country despite that, and just so many great themes and drama and conflict and terrible things to throw at my characters. You really can't go wrong when it comes to World War II.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite time periods to read about, and because there is so much. I mean, I didn't know so much about world. I mean, there was so much I didn't know about it, and so it's always fun to hear a new perspective on it, and then, so tell me the term again and how these are written in.
Yeah. So my first novel is an epistolary novel, which $10 word for your vocabulary, which means that it's written entirely in letters or other documents. So things like Dracula, the Screwtape Letters, the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society are all
I'm impressed that you can say that so quickly.
I know. Well, it's a book I really love, so I have lots of practice saying it. I usually just call it Potato Peel Pie Society for short. But the idea of it is that it has lots of letters from different fictional characters to other characters. And sometimes in Things We Didn't Say, I'll throw in a newspaper article or a telegram that advances the plot as you go. And so in the story, the very first letter is the main character saying to her lawyer, "Thanks for defending me for being accused from treason. Here are all of the letters that I've written in the past year so that you can see that this charge against me is baseless."
Wow.
And so you have to figure out what happened in that year that she works at the prisoner of war camp that got her accused of treason in the first place. So really fun style to write. It's very different for a lot of people, I think, too, to read a story written in that style.
Yes, I was telling you before, I've never read anything like that.
Yeah.
So, and then your second book is not the same type, but...
Right. The second book has more of a mystery element, which would be really hard to do in letter form. So the first chapter is in letters, and then you have the bulk of the story, and then the epilogue is in letters as you find out what happened to the characters at the end. So
nice. And then I can't remember, did you say you have working on a third book?
Yes, working on a third one. There are a few letters toward the end of that, although I'm still in the editing process right now, so who knows? They could stay in there, or they could all get cut out.
I was gonna say, is this like your calling card that you have letters, or?
I do. This time I didn't do it on purpose, so maybe it's just something that I love because I love writing letters myself. But it is kind of a fun way to sneak in some stuff in the story and to hear from other characters who aren't necessarily the point of view characters, and you get to let them talk for themselves a little bit, which I really enjoy.
Sure. So how long did it take you to get published?
That's a funny story. So when I said I work in publishing, I'm actually the fiction publicist at Bethany House, which is the place that published my first novel, and didn't get into working for publishing, working in publishing, intending to be an author. That was 8 years ago that I started working there. Just really loved marketing, and I love what I do and connecting readers with authors. But as years went on, I was writing on the side and had this idea for something that was a little bit different for historical story. I've written many things that are in the drawer and will never leave the drawer, and everyone should be thankful for that. They all should be glad that you're not going to see those stories. But this was one that as I started writing it, I thought, I think there's something here. And I think this is different enough that it could find a place. So I talked to one of the senior editors at Bethany House and I said, hey, am I going in a good direction here? Like, do I have, should I develop this idea further? And he was like, I want to see this when this is done. I was just expecting him to give me some feedback and help me along. But he was the only person at Bethany House who knew that I had written it, because then in publishing, what will often happen is editors will look over a manuscript and then say that they'd be interested in bringing it to the rest of the publishing team. So you have the salespeople, you've got the marketing people, you've got the VPs of the company and such who all weigh in on, they look at the book's first several chapters and information about the book and decide if they want to give it a contract. So we did that, but under a different name, because I was supposed to be in that meeting.
Oh, sure.
As one of the people on the marketing team. So
what name was it, by the way?
I am trying to remember. It was Beth something.
House?
I don't know, but yeah, sure, you could go by that. So that's what we did, and I remember our copywriter came into my office and she said, Amy, have you read this manuscript we're going to talk about in 2 weeks? And I made some nonsense excuse about oh yeah, haven't gotten around to them yet. She was like, well, let me tell you, the main character's sense of humor reminds me so much of you. I think you'll love it. And I was like, maybe I will. And so then she left, and after the meeting, which I was conveniently not present for because I scheduled something else at the same time, she came into my office and said, you didn't tell me. And everyone was very excited and didn't know that I had been working on that project. So it took a while to write the book, and then the editor I talked to originally gave me feedback for revisions on it. But I didn't have the very long publishing journey that a lot of people have, even though I sat on several manuscripts because I knew they weren't good enough, but I didn't have the same cycle of meeting editors and rejections and such. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for all that I've learned in publishing. But yes, it was a very different publication journey and kind of a fun one to talk about.
Yeah, that is a very fun story.
Yeah.
So what is your writing process? I mean, when you, obviously you're in a full-time job.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is it at midnight?
I'm not a night owl. I know a lot of authors are, and I think that's great. But my brain stops functioning after about 10 p.m. And so that's the point where if I were to keep going on the story, that story would go downhill really fast. And not in a plot tension kind of way. So I work a lot on weekends. I'll sometimes get up early and do some writing then, balancing. I'm working from home right now, and so sometimes lunch break is a good time to get a little bit of writing in. And as far as the process, I wish, and maybe someday I'll learn, some sort of organized process to my writing. I'm more of a discovery writer where I will have an idea of the characters and some of the things that will happen, especially writing historical fiction, some of the history that I want to work into the story. So my second novel, The Lines Between Us, deals with conscientious objectors and who parachuted into wildfires during World War II because they wanted to prove that they still had courage even though they didn't believe it was right to kill someone. And so I knew I was going to include some of the historical stories that those smoke jumpers had, which helped with some of the plot points, but no idea what the ending was going to be, no idea how we were going to work things out. And sometimes when I finish a manuscript, it is just a mess. And there's a lot to work through in the editing, but some people put all of their work in the beginning and create a detailed outline and stick to it. And some people just know they're going to have their work at the end, where they have to end up revising and editing a whole lot to get it where it is.
Sure.
So,
I mean, it's like life. We're all different. You know?
Exactly. And I'm so grateful we're all different. But it is something I like to tell newer writers who are starting out, because they read their favorite authors publish books and they think, wow, I could never do something like that, and they get discouraged, and some of them stop writing. But they're not seeing the mess.
Right.
Like, they're seeing their own mess in the middle of their manuscript, but they can't see that all of their authors who they admire have a point where their manuscript doesn't look the way they want it to, and where things are off or frustrating, or that where there are plot holes all over the place. And we all have that.
I think that's a very good point to make. I mean, even in the video world, you know, when I'm shooting, I shoot probably 10 takes of one shot.
Wow.
You know, because you're like, oh, I jerked a little bit, or you know. So yeah, it is.
You only see the best ones,
Yes, you
but
only
the people
see the
behind the
best.
scenes see all of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today and sharing your story, and I'm excited to read those books.
Yeah.
You know, I like I said, I love World War II, and I can't wait to read them.
I hope you enjoy something, and maybe it'll make you want to go write a letter.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.